Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of A Wild Mystery Podcast Appears, where we discuss mysteries, histories, and occasionally conspiracies. I'm your host, Belle.
And I'm your co-host, Ollie.
Today, we are reviewing the case of the John F. Kennedy assassination.
Today's content warnings are as follows. Murder, assassination, and the government.
Which is my favorite content warning that we have had so far. However, an incredibly appropriate trigger warning.
And I think let's add conspiracies to that trigger warning.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah.
They're brushed lightly. So, who was John F. Kennedy? John F. Kennedy was the 35th president of the United States. He was born on May 29th in 1917 in Massachusetts. I also want to say, I'm sorry for any people who live in Massachusetts. I hate pronouncing your damn state, okay?
It's like I've discovered people can't pronounce the word toddler. People
What?
can't do it. Everyone says toddler.
Who the fuck says
At least like
toddler?
3 separate people that I work
Toddler?
with. Yeah. Toddler versus toddler.
Who the fuck says toddler?
People cannot say the word toddler.
There's
man.
this YouTuber that I watch because she has a channel. It's called Acre Homesteads. I enjoy her content. Plus, she's kind of got me into wanting to try and garden. But she pronounces it like she doesn't pronounce enchiladas correctly. And I don't just mean like, oh, there's no like she's not saying enchiladas. Yeah. I'm talking like the word enchiladas like that is not pronounced correctly. Hey everybody, this is Editing Belle. I just wanted to come on and say a quick apology to Becky at Acre Homesteads. It was totally not fair of me to say this about you. You pronounce words just fine. Not everyone pronounces words the same way, and I obviously don't pronounce words correctly a lot. So it was not fair of me to say this about you at all. And it was also very ableist to others who maybe might not be able to say words that the way that they want them to come out. Culturally, people say words differently based on the area that they're in or the accents that they have. So this was not cool of me to say. So I do want to apologize for this blunder. And encourage you guys, if anyone's interested in gardening, homemaking, freezer meals, any of that kind of cool stuff, to check out Becky's channel at Acre Homesteads, because she's actually a really cool content creator. Anyway, I hope you guys can enjoy the rest of the episode.
It
infuriates me.
In England, they say jalapeno, not jalapenos. Bugs me. This is why we revolted. Anyway. I'm sorry, all our English viewers. I'm not sorry. You guys are in. Yeah.
Tortilla.
You guys are in on the joke, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Do you want a coaster? I don't care. I like coasters, but.
Oh no, I was gonna say mine's not.
Yeah.
Leaking.
Mine is.
Out of
mine's
context
sweating.
Conversations, yeah. We're referring to drinks.
And now we're going to refer to the John F. Kennedy assassination.
I still maintain I don't like saying Massachusetts. He graduated from Harvard in 1940 before joining the Naval Reserve.
I wonder if that was easier getting into Harvard back in the day.
Probably. Well, he also did have quite the influential
He was family. A Kennedy.
He was a Kennedy. He served during World War II and commanded a series of PT boats, which are basically small torpedo boats, in the Pacific Theater. While serving, one of the boats, the PT-109, sank, and his survival and subsequent rescue of his fellow sailors made him a hero, and he was honored by being awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Medal.
Okay.
Unfortunately, he did sustain serious injuries from that incident.
I feel like I have never
known that.
Well, why do I feel like I know that he had lasting injuries, but I never knew what they were from?
So there's a whole section on his medical BS.
Oh boy.
But I didn't go into any of it because I'm like, that is more your arena. Okay. I figure if you want to ever do a follow-up, you can do this. It was really interesting. He had a lot of shit wrong with him.
There were some. I'm gonna have to do an episode on polio because you know how I think it's FDR was in the wheelchair.
I think so. Yeah. The only reason I know that
because of
National Treasure too.
Oh. I was thinking of our high school English teacher, or not English teacher, history teacher.
No, because I didn't learn shit from her. The English teacher.
Yeah. Oh, the English. Really? I liked her.
I liked her in the respect that she was very nice and kind of quirky.
Mm-hmm.
Actually learning from her, I did have a hard time.
Okay. I mean, she did make us read Huck Finn, which is my least favorite book in the world.
Oh, are you referring to that one?
Yeah. Who are you referring to? Wait.
We're gonna cut this out. Mrs.
Anyway.
Whole big section there getting cut out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't even know how to start. Okay. Later, he made his foray into politics and started as a U.S. representative for the 11th District in Boston, which was from 1947 to 1953. He was only 30 at the time.
Okay.
He was then elected to the Senate and served as a junior senator for Massachusetts from 1953 to 1960. While serving in the Senate, he wrote Profiles in Courage, which earned him a Pulitzer Prize.
Okay. Is that a book? I've never heard of this.
What, Profiles in Courage?
Yeah.
Why do I feel like I wrote that today and I don't feel like I'm reading that right? That sounded concerning.
I left an empty can on the windowsill.
I see.
And Kepler likes to mess with everything, so.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Okay, it is called Profiles in Courage. I'm not an idiot.
And it's a book?
It is.
Okay.
Yes, Pulitzer Prize is a book prize. And then in 1960, he was finally elected as president, and barely beating out Richard Nixon, who at the time was the current vice president. He was inaugurated at 43, making him the youngest president to serve, and was the first Catholic president. And by the way, he is the youngest president to date. You only have to be 35 to be president.
Jesus.
Which I don't know why I thought the age limit to be president was older than 35.
I thought so
too. But it is
35.
Yeah. I would have expected at least 40.
Yeah.
But for any young aspiring politicians out there,
yeah,
let's get someone young in the fucking presidential chair, please. Yeah. Please. Some of his achievements while in office are the following. He worked with Congress to not only help people earn more at their jobs, but also to increase the number of jobs. One example was by building new highways. He also cut taxes and believed there should be a program to help poor and older Americans get health care. During the early 1960s, the Civil Rights Movement, which focused on obtaining equal rights for African Americans, was growing. When President Kennedy assumed office, people who were Black, mostly in the South, could not eat in restaurants or go to school with people who were white. In June of 1963, he gave a major speech calling for new civil rights laws. He said, 100 years of delay have passed since President Lincoln freed the slaves, yet their heirs, their grandsons, are not fully free. He unfortunately died before some of his proposed laws were passed, and President Lyndon B. Johnson, who took office after his death, helped pass the Civil Rights Act and healthcare programs to poor and older Americans.
Okay. I don't know why I felt like he was a shitty president.
Well, so
okay. Never mind.
Kennedy's administration included high tensions with communist states in the Cold War.
Okay, this is why. Yeah.
As a result, he increased the number of American military advisors in South Vietnam. The Strategic Hamlet Program began in Vietnam during his presidency. And in April 1961, he authorized an attempt to overthrow the Cuban government of Fidel Castro and the failed Bay of Pigs invasion.
This is why we removed Cuba from maps.
The Cuban Missile Crisis!
Okay.
Hey!
Why America didn't want to admit Cuba was a place for God fucking knows how.
For a bit.
Until like 2 years ago or something. I'm exaggerating.
In November of 1961, he authorized Operation Mongoose, which also aimed at removing the communists from power in Cuba. He rejected Operation Northwoods in March of 1962, but his administration continued to plan for an invasion of Cuba in the summer of 1962. The following October, U.S. spy planes discovered Soviet missile bases had been deployed in Cuba. The resulting period of tensions, termed the Cuban Missile Crisis, nearly resulted in the breakout of global thermonuclear conflict. He also signed the first nuclear weapons treaty in October of 1963.
Yeah, this is why
Yep. In his inaugural address, President Kennedy said that the United States and other countries should fight the common enemies of man: tyranny, poverty, disease, and war itself.
You guys can't see my face.
She's not
We're
pleased.
gonna end war by starting wars.
To help do this, Kennedy set up the Peace Corps in 1961, through which volunteers help communities and people in need around the world. JFK also started the Alliance for Progress to give money to countries in Latin America. He also presided over the continuation of the Apollo program to land a man on the moon before 1970. Now, while most of those things are not bad, he wasn't a saint. During his time as a senator, he had an affair with Gunilla von Post, who later wrote that the future president tried to end his marriage to be with her before having any children with his wife.
Mm-hmm.
Kennedy was also reported to have had affairs with women such as Marilyn Monroe, Judith Campbell, Mary Pinchot Meyer, Marlene Dietrich, Mimi Alford, and his wife's press secretary, Pamela Turner.
I'm laughing because the reported to have had affairs such as Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah. With women such as...
reported to have had... Maybe had an affair with...
Maybe.
He had an affair with Marilyn Monroe. Confirmed.
Yeah.
Watch her singing Happy Birthday to him.
Yes. Ooh, a little uncomfortable for the rest of the room.
Nothing against her.
No, absolutely.
But
I love Marilyn Monroe.
Me too. She had lots of struggles with mental illness that are very sad.
Yes. Maybe one day we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI director, received reports about Kennedy's indiscretions. These included an alleged East German spy, Ellen Romstick.
Okay.
Rometsch.
You want to speak German? Listen.
Romsk. I'm giving all of that in.
Cut that out.
No. According to historian Michael Bechloss, in July of 1963, Hoover reportedly informed Bobby Kennedy about the affair.
Who is he?
Robert Kennedy, who not only was JFK's brother, he was the appointed Attorney General.
Okay.
Who was also assassinated in 1968. I believe it was 1968.
This whole family.
I get into it.
No wonder there's so many conspiracy theories involving the Kennedys.
Yep. Whoever told the Attorney General, or Hoover told the Attorney General that he not only had information that the president, but also others in Washington, had been involved with a woman suspected as a Soviet intelligence agent, someone linked to East German intelligence. Bobby Kennedy reportedly took the matter sufficiently seriously to raise it with leading Democratic and Republican figures in Congress. Former Secret Service agent Larry Newman also remembered morale problems that the president's indiscretions engendered with the Secret Service. Moving on to his actual assassination and kind of the leading up to his assassination. In the fall of 1963, JFK and his political advisors were preparing for his next presidential campaign. Although having not formally announced his candidacy, it was evident that Kennedy was going to run, and he seemed confident about his chances for re-election.
So this was his first term, and he was going into... Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if term limits were in place yet.
Yeah, so he was starting to prep for his second term.
Okay.
Or, well, hoping to get reelected for a second term. At the end of September, the president traveled west, speaking in 9 different states in less than a week. The trip was meant to put a spotlight on natural resources and conservation efforts, but JFK also used it to sound out themes such as education, national security, and world peace for his run in 1964. A month later, the president addressed Democratic gatherings in Boston and Philadelphia. Then, on November 12th, he held the first important political planning session for the upcoming election year.
So he was a Democrat, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because Nixon was a Republican.
Okay.
That's the only reason I remember that. At the I'm gonna redo this one part. Then on November 12th, he held the first important political planning session for the upcoming election year. At the meeting, JFK stressed the importance of winning Florida and Texas and talked about his plans to visit both states in the next 2 weeks. Mrs. Kennedy would accompany him on the swing through Texas, which would be her first extended public appearance since the loss of their baby Patrick in August.
Oh my God. This poor woman.
On November 21st, the president and the first lady departed on Air Force One for the 2-day, 5-city tour of Texas.
Okay, wait. Yes, okay.
Yeah. President Kennedy was aware that a feud among party leaders in Texas could jeopardize his chances of carrying the state in 1964, and one of his aims for the trip was to bring Democrats together.
You don't know if she miscarried or if Patrick had been born.
He was born.
Oh. Because, I mean, not that it's not rough when you miscarry, but it...
Oh, no, she had a miscarriage, too.
I was more wondering health-wise, what, like,
state
physically health-wise, what state she was in, because a miscarriage is rough on your body as well.
Yes. Yeah, so she had, I believe, in 1955 she had a miscarriage, but I'm totally getting the years wrong. I'm like 90% sure. But I do kind of get into the Kennedy family's misfortunes. He also knew that a relatively small but vocal group of extremists was contributing to the political tensions in Texas and would likely make its presence felt, particularly in Dallas, where U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Adlai Stevenson, had been physically attacked a month earlier after making a speech there. Nonetheless, JFK seemed to relish the prospect of leaving Washington, getting out among the people, and into the political fray.
Like, get me out of here!
Done with you politicians! The first stop was in San Antonio. Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, Governor John B. Connolly, and Senator Ralph Yarborough led the welcoming party.
Wait. Lyndon B. Johnson and JFK both left Washington at the same time? That seems weird to me. No, like, just the fact that JFK...
I don't think they left at the same time.
No, but, like, JFK left and Lyndon B... Yeah, they were gone at the same time.
Yeah.
What?
Well,
I guess you don't... Well, okay.
So, JFK is the most recent president to have died while in office. Before...
Because I guess I'm just, like... If Kennedy was focusing so much on campaign, or if he was so busy, Lyndon B. Johnson would be the person who was doing most of the actual government shit, right? But he wasn't there physically to sign papers, and he didn't have technology where he could have signed electronically and shit like that, you know?
Yeah. So, FDR was the president who had died before him, and that was in 1945. And even then, as far as he was natural causes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was natural causes. But yeah, because of cerebral hemorrhage. So I doubt that they were really thinking about...
I'm just wondering who was running the government. Like, there are papers that the president has to sign.
Every day.
Who is doing that?
Great question. No idea.
You were there.
Yeah. They accompanied the president to Brooks Air Force Base for the dedication of the Aerospace Medical Health Center. Continuing to Houston, he addressed the League of United Latin American Citizens and spoke at a testimonial dinner for Congressman Albert Thomas before ending the day in Fort Worth. A light rain was falling on Friday morning. November 22nd, but a crowd of several thousand stood in the parking lot outside the Texas hotel where the Kennedys had spent the night. A platform was...
They knew which hotel he was at.
Right? I know. I was thinking
on
the same.
Secret Service. Like,
well, I'm sure that he's the reason that it's all buffed up now.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair.
Or at least a start to it. A platform was set up and the president wearing no protection against the weather. I love how, like, no protection against the weather.
Like, it's the weather? It's not what he should be worried about. Jesus.
Bulletproof vest, maybe?
Especially because he was in a fucking... what is it called? No roof.
Convertible?
Convertible, yeah.
Well, this isn't even when they get in the car.
Yeah.
This is before. So, no protection against the weather, came out to make some brief remarks. There are no faint hearts in Fort Worth, he began, and I appreciate you being here this morning. Mrs. Kennedy is organizing herself. It takes longer, but of course she looks better than we do when she does it. He went on to talk about the nation's need for being second to none in defense and space, for continued growth in the economy, and the willingness of citizens of the United States to assume the burdens of leadership. Also, by the way, this is the guy who said, ask not what you can do for what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. This is him.
I have thoughts about that today.
I do as well. Yeah. The warmth of the audience's response was palpable as the president reached out to shake hands amidst a sea of smiling faces.
Oh, bro,
and that
this
is that actual
would
photo.
Never have happened today.
Right?
This picture would never have happened.
Right? I'm like, how crazy is that? And
yeah.
What surprises me, and
because like all these people behind him are not Secret Service. They don't look in uniform.
Yeah.
He's just in the middle of a fucking crowd. Jesus.
He's just chilling. Back inside the hotel, the president spoke at a breakfast of the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce focusing on military preparedness. We are still a keystone in the arch of freedom, he said. We will continue to do our duty, and the people of Texas will be in the lead. The presidential party left the hotel and went by motorcade to Carswell Air Force Base for the 13-minute flight to Dallas. Arriving at Love Field, President and Mrs. Kennedy disembarked and immediately walked towards a fence where a crowd of well-wishers had gathered, and they spent several minutes shaking hands.
Mrs. Kennedy sounds like she was actually doing very well considering the circumstances.
Well, and she wasn't very much of a public person.
Yeah, that she
didn't really come out and do these events. So.
Which, I mean, good for her. You know?
But how horrible that one of the ones that she does end up going on.
Yeah. I mean, if you've seen the video, which I think if you're living in America, you probably have at some point.
Yeah, I've seen it once before. I didn't actively go looking for it.
Yeah.
Again. The First Lady received a bouquet of red roses, which she brought with her to the waiting limousine. Governor John Connally and his wife Nellie were already seated in the open convertible as the Kennedys entered and sat behind them. Since it was no longer raining, the plastic bubble top had been left off. Vice President and Mrs. Johnson occupied another car in the motorcade. The procession left the airport and traveled along a 10-mile route that wound through downtown Dallas on the way to the Trade Mart, where the president was scheduled to speak at a luncheon. Crowds of excited people lined the streets and waved to the Kennedys. The car turned off Main Street at Dealey Plaza around 12:30 p.m., and as it was passing the Texas School Bank Depository, gunfire suddenly reverberated in the plaza. Bullets struck the president's neck and head, and he slumped over towards Mrs. Kennedy. The governor was shot in his back. The car sped off to Parkland Memorial Hospital, just a few minutes away, but little could be done for the president. A Catholic priest was summoned to administer the last rites, and at 1 p.m., John F. Kennedy was pronounced dead. Though seriously wounded, Governor Connally would recover. The president's body was brought to Love Field and placed on Air Force One, and before the plane took off, a grim-faced Lyndon B. Johnson stood in the tight, crowded compartment and took the oath of office administered by U.S. District Court Judge Sarah Hughes, and the brief ceremony took place at 2:38 p.m., and unfortunately, Jacqueline was actually there when he was sworn in as president.
Unfortunately?
Well, I think it's kind of hard to watch somebody be sworn in.
Yeah, over your husband's body.
Yeah, because he was in the plane. His corpse was there.
So. Yeah.
But because
very fast that all that shit happened.
Wow. Because of political unrest, and they were worried about the government, the government collapsing, they wanted to swear him in as quickly as possible, is what I read.
Do you know what time he was shot?
They said 30 minutes later, so at about 12:30.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's extremely fast that all of this happened.
Very much so. Less than an hour earlier, police had arrested Lee Harvey Oswald, a recently hired employee at the Texas School Book Depository. He is being held for the assassination of President Kennedy and the fatal shooting shortly afterward of patrolman J.D. Tippit on a Dallas street. And I go into a little bit more about Oswald and that, but I want to kind of wrap up this part before I move on. So, on Sunday morning, November 24th, Oswald was scheduled to be transferred from police headquarters to the county jail. Viewers across America watching the live television coverage suddenly saw a man aim a pistol and fire at point-blank range. The assailant was identified as Jack Ruby, a local nightclub owner, and Oswald died 2 hours later at Parkland Hospital. That same day, President Kennedy's flag-draped casket was moved from the White House to the Capitol on a caisson drawn by 6 gray horses, accompanied by one riderless black horse. At Mrs. Kennedy's request, the cortege and other ceremony details were modeled on the funeral of Abraham Lincoln. Crowds lined Pennsylvania Avenue, and many wept openly as the caisson passed. During the 21 hours that the president's body lay in state in the Capitol Rotunda, about 250,000 people filed by to pay their respects. He was a pretty well-liked president. And on November 25th, 1963, President Kennedy was laid to rest in Arlington National Cemetery. The funeral was attended by heads of state and representatives from more than 100 countries, with untold millions more watching on television. Afterward, at the gravesite, Mrs. Kennedy and her husband's brothers, Robert and Edward, lit an eternal flame. Here's where it gets really sad for me, as you can see in that picture. Perhaps the most indelible images of the day were the salute to his father given by little John F. Kennedy Jr., and it was his 3rd birthday.
On the day of his funeral?
Yeah. Oh my God. And daughter Carolyn kneeling next to her mother as the president's bier, and the extraordinary grace and dignity shown by Jacqueline Kennedy. And I will post this picture, but it also is crazy to me how much Robert looks like his brother. So, getting into Lee Harvey Oswald. He was born in New Orleans in 1939 and joined the Marines in 1956. He was discharged in 1959 and 9 days later left for the Soviet Union, where he tried unsuccessfully to become a citizen. He worked in the Minsk and married a Soviet woman, and in 1962 was allowed to return to the U.S. with his wife and infant daughter.
Did he not get a green card for... Well, I guess it was the Soviet Union, not the U.S.
Yeah. In early 1963, he bought a .38 revolver and rifle with a telescopic sight by mail order, and on April 10th in Dallas, he shot at and missed former U.S. Army General Edwin Walker, a figure known for his extreme right-wing views. Later that month, Oswald went to New Orleans and founded a branch of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, a pro-Castro organization. In September of 1963, he went to Mexico City, where investigators alleged that he attempted to secure a visa to travel to Cuba or return to the USSR. In October, he returned to Dallas and took a job at the Texas School Book Depository building. Now, less than an hour after Kennedy was shot, Oswald killed a policeman who questioned him on the street near his rooming house in Dallas. 30 minutes later, Oswald was arrested in a movie theater by police responding to reports of a suspect. He was formally arraigned on November. He was formally. Why does that? I don't know. It just doesn't sound right to me. Because it sounds like I'm saying formerly, not formally. I don't know. He was formally arraigned on November 23rd for the murders of President Kennedy and Officer J.D. Tippit. Questioned by both law enforcement officers and the press, Oswald protested his innocence, claiming that he was a patsy. He requested to be represented by, but was never able to contact, John Abt, the staff attorney of the Communist Party USA, who was well known for his defense of communists. After being held for 2 days and 2 nights, Oswald was being transferred from Dallas City Hall, which contained the headquarters and jail of the Dallas Police Department, to the county jail on the morning of November 24th. We went into this. Jack Ruby was well known at the police station and to police who frequented his club. And he shot Oswald with a handgun as the cameras, were there. Jack later stated that he shot Oswald to spare Jacqueline Kennedy from having to testify at Oswald's trial, and Oswald was then taken to Parkland Memorial, where Kennedy had died, and now Oswald as well. Ruby was tried, found guilty of murder on March 14th of 1964 and sentenced to death. In October 1966, however, a Texas appeals court reversed the conviction, though Ruby died on January 3rd, 1967, also at Parkland.
Fuck.
Before a new trial could be held.
The idea that some people have that they would rather see somebody. Okay. So many criminals get out of facing consequences for their actions by committing suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And for him to have said, I want to protect Jacqueline.
Yeah. He didn't die by suicide.
What?
He didn't die by suicide.
No, for Ruby to have said he was protecting Jack, it's always so frustrating when a criminal kills themselves and it was because they didn't want to be held accountable for their action. The police were closing in.
That they would rather die than face.
And the families of the victims are always so frustrated by that their loved ones never get justice.
Yeah.
So for Ruby to have said, I killed him because I wanted to protect Jacqueline Kennedy, I'm sure, would have much rather seen
him
Oswald
serve in court.
Yeah.
Serve in jail. Yeah. Now, so as I stated, Jack Ruby, whose full name was Jacob Rubenstein, he operated strip joints and dance halls in Dallas and had minor connections to organized crime. He features very prominently in Kennedy assassination theories, and many believe he killed Oswald to keep him from revealing a larger conspiracy. In his trial, Ruby denied the allegation and pleaded innocent because his great grief over Kennedy's murder had caused him to suffer psychomotor epilepsy and shoot Oswald unconsciously.
Yeah, fucking sure.
Yeah. The jury found Ruby guilty of murder with malice and sentenced him to die.
This is nowadays, even in when Oswald was moved, they would have protected him better too, because they would have been afraid that shit like this would have happened.
Yeah, well, you would think.
Yeah.
And then, as previously stated, in January of 1969, while awaiting his new trial to be held in Wichita Falls, he died of lung cancer. The official Warren Commission report of 1964 concluded that neither Oswald nor Ruby were part of a larger conspiracy, either domestic or international, to assassinate President Kennedy. Despite its firm conclusions, the report failed to silence conspiracy theories surrounding the event, and in 1978, the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which is crazy to me that that's a thing, concluded in a preliminary report that Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy that may have involved multiple shooters and organized crime. The committee's findings, as with those of the Warren Commission, continue to be disputed by some. The conspiracy theories. Aliens! I'm kidding. There's actually no aliens in these conspiracy theories. Crazy. So Cuba is central to several of the conspiracy theories. One theory was that the Cuban government was responsible. It gathered a lot of It gathered a lot of steam after the Senate Select Committee. Jesus, that's such a long title. I'm not doing that.
SSCSGO.
SSCSGO, yeah. Concerning the intelligence activities, revealed that the CIA, had made several attempts to assassinate Cuban leader Fidel Castro. In denying the allegations, Castro argued that such an action would have posed too great a risk of retaliation by the United States. This line of thought finds great significance in a trip that Oswald made in late September of 1963 to Mexico City, where he remained until early October and made repeated attempts to contact the Cuban and Soviet consulates. At the other end of the Cuban political conspiracy spectrum were theories that attempted to tie the assassination and Oswald to anti-Castro groups who were angry at Kennedy for his decision to withhold U.S. military support for the failed Bay of Pigs invasion. Kennedy's lack of support for the invasion is also cited as motive by those who hold the vindictive elements within the CIA were behind the assassination. These theories emphasize Oswald's efforts on behalf of the pro-Castro Fair Play for Cuba Committee in New Orleans in April to August of 1963 and his encounters with individuals from both pro and anti-Castro groups. Obviously, lots of blame placed on Cuba.
Yeah.
And I wonder if, like how much traction that those have now versus the conspiracy theories that existed then.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I'm gonna skip like half of that. One of the most developed theories was pushed by Jim Garrison, the district attorney of New Orleans, who alleged those anti-Castro and anti-communist elements within the CIA were behind a conspiracy that involved Oswald and a coterie of rabid coterie. Prince of the Fabulous. Sorry. That involved Oswald and a coterie of rabid New Orleans anti-communists. Businessman Clay Shaw, private detective and former FBI agent Guy Bannister, and David Ferry, who had been in the same Civil Air Patrol squadron as Oswald in the 1950s. Bannister and Ferry died before Garrison brought his case to trial, but Shaw was found not guilty in 1969. The book Garrison later wrote about his pursuit, On the Trail of the Assassins, My Investigation and Prosecution of the Murder of President Kennedy, 1988, was a touchstone for Oliver Stone's movie, JFK, from 1991, which I have actually never seen.
Yeah, neither have I.
Yet another theory put Johnson at the center of a plot to kill Kennedy to clear his path to the presidency. Evidence for this theory was supposedly provided by a statement by convicted Watergate conspirator and former CIA agent E. Howard Hunt Jr. claimed that Johnson had ordered CIA agents to kill Kennedy. While still frames from the Zapruder's 8mm footage had been published in November of 1963 in Life, which had purchased the rights to the film, which I believe... I'm not going to get into that because I didn't verify that. Never mind.
Okay.
I think it sold for $16 million. Damn. Yeah. The footage itself did not receive a wide viewing until 1975 when it was shown on the Goodnight America television program. In showing Kennedy's head jerking backward, the film seemed to indicate that a shot had come from in front of the president and not from Oswald's sniper nest.
That's what I thought when I saw that. I thought he had been shot from the front.
Yeah.
But I don't know how you react to being shot because I've never been shot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's adding seeming support to those who argued that there had been a second shooter on Dealey's Plaza grassy knoll. The uproar generated by the American public's response to the film and by the revelations that the CIA had withheld pertinent information from the Warren Commission contributed to the establishment in 1976 of the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which will now be called the HSCA, which investigated not only the assassination of Kennedy, but also that of MLK Jr.
Okay.
Although the HSCA's findings were largely in line with those of the Warren Commission, including the conclusion that a shot by Oswald had killed the president and that a single bullet had hit both Kennedy and Connally, its bombshell revelation was a dictable audio recording made from a Dallas motorcycle policeman's microphone that was said to provide evidence of 4 shots. That is 3 by Oswald and a 4th by another shooter. That 4th shot, a miss, was thought to have come from the grassy knoll. As a result of this acoustic evidence, the HSCA concluded that there had been 2 shooters and that the assassination was likely the product of conspiracy. The committee was also The committee also concluded that neither any U.S. security nor intelligence agencies, including the CIA, nor the government of Cuba or the Soviet Union, had been involved. It did not rule out the involvement of organized crime or anti-Castro groups, but it could not prove it. Not long after the committee published its report, however, the reliability of acoustic evidence and the conclusions drawn from it came under broad criticism, greatly undermining the HSCA's assertion that there had been a conspiracy. So,
I'm wondering this, with all the stuff with Oswald and his all the times that he's been to Cuba and the Soviet Union, it would have been interesting if it had actually gone to trial and he'd had some sort of mental health assessment. Because I wonder, with all of that, if he was paranoid to an extent.
Yeah. Well, then I'm curious to hear
my guess is that they probably haven't released it, but...
The release and popularity of Stone's JFK in 1991 sparked a new round of conspiracy speculation, to which Congress responded with the passage of the President John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992 and the creation of the Assassination Records Review Board, the members of which were not sworn in until 1994. And from 1994 to 98, this independent board reviewed, declassified, and made available millions of pages of previously sealed or secret documents from the Warren Commission, the HSCA, the FBI, the CIA, and scores of other government organizations. The board also conducted some new interviews. The act required that the U.S. National Archives and Records Administration, NARA, release all of the related documents within 25 years. As the October 26, 2017 deadline for the release of the remaining undisclosed documents approached, U.S. President... I don't want to say it.
Okay.
I don't want to say it. What number president was he? 44?
I mean, drag him, but probably 45th?
Hey everybody, I just wanted to come back on and say whenever I refer to the 44th president, I was totally incorrect. I was referring to our 45th president of the United States. So anytime you hear me say 44, autocorrect in your head that I am talking about number 45. Thanks, guys. The 44th U.S. president effusively anticipated the disclosure. At the 11th hour, however, the White House was inundated with requests from the CIA and the FBI to redact several hundred documents in the interest of national security, which of course they would.
You had 25 years to redact these goddamn documents.
Yep. It was thought that some of the intelligence agency's concerns related to fears that the remaining documents included the identities of U.S. intelligence sources who might still be living and at risk of retaliation. After some hesitancy, the 44th president compiled the agency's request, placing some 300 files under further classified review, which was to be completed within 6 months, but authorizing the release of nearly 2,900 other unseen documents. In so doing, the 44th president advised the intelligence agencies to be extremely circumspect in any request for further delays, noting that the need for continued protection can only have grown weaker with the passage of time.
I mean, listen, that's actually fair.
Yeah. One thing that person did correctly.
He was right about.
Historians were dubious that any of the newly released documents would provide conclusive as evidence for any of the conspiracy theories. Some pundits,
I think,
cautioned some. What?
Pundits, I think.
There was some caution against cherry picking. Verbal editing. There was some. There was some caution against cherry-picking supportive information. Among the documents released were a minutely detailed account of Oswald's trip to Mexico City and memos from high-level intelligence officials, including one in which FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover bemoans the Dallas Police Department's failure to heed FBI warnings of the need to protect Oswald during his fatal transfer from the Dallas Police Jail.
Okay.
Another Hoover memo describes the Soviet government's response to the assassination and the KGB's conviction that Johnson was involved. As the April 2018 deadline for the reevaluation of the files that had been held back drew nearer, NARA released additional batches of documents, some of which had never been seen. Most of the documents released, however, already had been made public, but were re-released with fewer redactions. In all, during 2017, NARA released nearly 35,000 documents related to the Kennedy assassination, including some 16,000 that were released in full. And on April 26th of 2018, the 44th president's administration surprised many observers by announcing a 3-year extension of the deadline for the release of some documents which it had deemed needed to remain confidential because of identifiable national security, law enforcement, and foreign affairs concerns. The new deadline for the further release of documents was set for October 26th of 21. All of the attempts to make previously classified information public was taken in the belief that removing the government's veil of secrecy from the assassination would help bring closure. However, decades after the event and the investigators' speculation continues and conspiracy theories still abound.
Yeah, because the government the CIA and the FBI are being incredibly fucking sketch about it. Like, listen, yep.
We just want to know.
Like, listen,
we just want to talk. We just want to talk.
Yeah, I get that they're dealing with a lot of national security, but again, they had 25 years.
28.
Yeah, 25 years before this even started to redact those files before the first deadline.
Yep.
Like,
that's government.
They weren't even thinking about it a couple weeks in advance and being like, oh shit, we don't have time. Like,
they're
like the hour before they're supposed to, they're like, hey.
Dude. Okay. Now, kind of getting into more specifically about a more out there theory is something referred to as the Kennedy curse. And actually, I was talking to my mother about this before she flew out today. She was like, oh yeah, I read about all of that. And I was like, really? And she's like, yeah. I was like, all of them? She's like, all of them. And I was like, huh.
Must have taken a while, my dude.
Well, it continues from what you can see. You should just scroll real quick.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I've heard some of this, but yeah.
Yeah. So, the Kennedy curse refers to a series of premature deaths, accidents, assassinations, or other calamities involving members of the American Kennedy family. The alleged curse has primarily struck the children and descendants of businessman Joseph P. Kennedy Sr., but has also affected family, friends, associates, and other relatives. Political assassinations and plane crashes have been the most common manifestations of the curse, following the
Chappaquiddick.
Thank you. Incident in 1969.
It should surprise nobody that I know how to pronounce that.
Yeah, right. Ted Kennedy is quoted saying he questioned if some awful curse did hang over all the Kennedys. And we're just going to go through the list because there's a lot.
Okay.
And these are in chronological order, so stay with me. August 12th of 1944, Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. died when the BQ-8 aircraft he was piloting accidentally exploded over the East Suffolk, England. In September 9th of 1944, William Cavendish, Honorable Marquess, sorry, not funny. William Cavendish Marquess of Hartington, newlywed husband of Kathleen Kennedy, was fatally shot by a German sniper while leading his company near Heppen, Belgium. On May 13th of 1948, Kathleen Kennedy, married to previous person, died in a plane crash in France. In August 9th of 1963, This is the little boy that passed away.
Oh.
Patrick Kennedy died of infant respiratory distress syndrome 2 days after his premature birth on August 7th. On November 22nd, obviously, President Kennedy was shot. On June 5th of 1968, President Kennedy's brother, Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General from before,
otherwise known as Bobby Kennedy,
was shot by Saran in the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles after his victory in the California Democratic presidential primary. So he was running for president.
Okay.
On April 25th of 1984, David Kennedy died of a drug overdose in Palm Beach, Florida. And he was 12 years old when he saw his father assassinated on live TV in the family's hotel room. Following a car accident, he began to abuse painkillers and was in and out of detox facilities throughout his youth. And on the day of his death, he was in Palm Beach to see his grandmother, who had just had a stroke. On December 31st, 1997, Michelle Kennedy died in a skiing accident after crashing into a tree in Aspen, Colorado. July 16th of 1999, John F. Kennedy Jr., the little boy saluting earlier, died when the plane he was piloting crashed into the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. The crash was attributed to pilot error and spatial disorientation. His wife and sister-in-law were also on board and died. September 16, 2011, Cara Kennedy died of a heart attack while exercising in Washington. She had...
DC.
In DC, yep, sorry. She had reportedly suffered from lung cancer 9 years earlier, but she had recovered after the removal of part of her right lung.
Damn.
In May 16th of 2012, Mary Kennedy died by suicide on the grounds of her home in Bedford, Westchester County, New York.
That doesn't seem like part of the curse to me. That seems like
it
should be separated.
Yeah, right. August 1st of 2019,
Suarez?
Circe?
Hey, Google.
Good time to take a break and breathe. I feel like I'm talking super fast.
I don't remember what I was going to say.
Do you think the suicide should be separate? But...
Yeah. Saoirse. Okay.
Saoirse.
They must be Welsh.
August 1st of 2019, Saoirse Kennedy Hill, granddaughter of Bobby Kennedy, died of an accidental drug overdose at the Kennedy compound in Hyannisport.
I remember what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That the a good, very good example of how weed is not a gateway drug, but opiates are, is the David A. Kennedy thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, began to abuse it after a car accident, which suggests he was in some sort of pain because of it and was prescribed painkillers, which he then got addicted to.
Yep.
Which is how most drug addictions happen, or a lot of them anyway.
Yes. And I believe the most recent one is
Maeve.
Yeah, well, because I was double checking that there weren't any more recent. And on April 2nd of 2020, Maeve Kennedy McKean disappeared with her 8-year-old son Gideon during a short canoe trip in the Chesapeake Bay. Maeve's body was found by divers 4 days later, and Gideon's body was found 2 days after hers, and on April 8th. Authorities believe Maeve paddled to retrieve her son's ball, leading the wind and current to overturn the canoe, which is very possible because we had that happen out here on Eklutna Lake. I actually know the women that happened to, by the way. I know them. And other incidents, this one makes me super sad. So, November of 1941, Rosemary Kennedy, who was JFK's sister.
Oh.
was 23, struggled to read and write, and she suffered from mood swings, seizures, and violent outbursts. During birth, Rosemary was deprived of oxygen as her mother and nurse waited for the doctor to arrive. As she grew older, she became more rebellious, and the family worried she would do something that would tarnish the Kennedy reputation. And they secretly arranged for her to undergo a prefrontal lobotomy.
Well, okay, her father did.
Yeah.
Going behind her mother's back.
Joseph Kennedy, yeah. Instead of saving her, she was left mentally and physically incapacitated, and she eventually died in 2005. However, Eunice Kennedy, her sister, grew close with Rosemary later in life, and Eunice actually went on to found the Special Olympics and the Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. Foundation, which researches developmental and intellectual disabilities. October 3rd of 1955, Ethel Kennedy's parents, Ann and George Skakel, died in a plane crash in Oklahoma. June 19 of 64, Ted Kennedy survived a plane crash that killed one of his aides as well as the pilot. The plane was on its way to a Democratic state endorsing convention in Springfield. And then following the crash, another, because he wasn't alive at the time, right? Whatever. I'm skipping that. I'm tired. There's too much of it. July 18th of 1969, Ted Kennedy accidentally drove his car off a bridge on...
Oh, that's Chappaquiddick, yeah.
Yep, Chappaquiddick Island. I was like, you couldn't see it, but I was pointing. I was like, no, I'm not saying it. Chappaquiddick Island, resulting in the drowning death of 28-year-old passenger Mary Jo Kopechny. In his televised statement a week later, he said that on the night of the incident, he wondered whether some awful curse did hang over all of the Kennedys. He did not report the incident to police until the next morning and pled guilty to a charge of leaving the scene of an accident.
Mm-hmm. And there are enough conspiracies about that one for a whole episode.
Right.
Yeah.
On August 13th of 1973, Joseph P. Kennedy II was the driver of a Jeep that crashed and left his passenger, Pam Kelly, paralyzed. And the other passenger was his brother David, who was injured, and Kelly eventually died in 2020. On November 17, 1973, Edward Kennedy Jr., who was 12, had his right leg surgically amputated as a result of bone cancer. On April 1st, 1991, William Kennedy Smith was arrested and charged with the rape of a young woman at the Kennedy estate in Palm Beach, Florida. Subsequent trial attracted extensive media coverage, and he was acquitted.
As expected of our court system.
Yep. May 4th of 2006, Congressman Patrick Kennedy crashed his car while intoxicated into a barricade on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. at 2:45 a.m. He later revealed an addiction to prescription medications, Ambien, and Phenergan?
Yeah, I think so.
And pleaded guilty to driving under the influence of prescription drugs, sentenced to 1 year probation and a fine of $350.
That's fucking nothing for the Kennedy family.
That's
literally a drop in the goddamn bucket. This is why they should be percentages of income and not...
Yep, because it has to actually be a punishment for the crime. And in May 4th of 2018, the Connecticut Supreme Court overturned the 1975 murder conviction of Ethel Kennedy's nephew, Michael Skakel, who was convicted of killing neighbor Martha Moxley by bludgeoning her to death with a golf club when both were teenagers. Skakel was sentenced to 20 years to life, a conviction overturned by the Connecticut lower courts in 2013 after he served 11 years, reinstated in 2017, then reversed again in 2018. On October 30th of 2020, a Connecticut prosecutor ruled that Skakel, age 60, would not face a second murder trial in the death of Moxley. Chief Connecticut State Attorney Richard Colangelo Jr. said there was insufficient evidence for a retrial.
I'm going to do...
And that is the bullshit with the Kennedy family.
I have had the Martha Moxley murder on my list to cover. And that is all I will say about that.
Yeah. There is so much crazy shit with him, and I didn't even get into, like, all of it. Like, all of his medical issues.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing there.
Because, I mean, at the end of the day, again, Occam's razor, I think Oswald probably did kill him.
Oh yeah,
because I mean,
there's many times and many evidence, a lot of evidence to support that you don't necessarily need an entire ass conspiracy plot. You just have to have one person who's crazy enough to do something, and he was crazy enough to do something.
The thing is, my parents worked for the government, for the federal government.
And the federal government is way different than state government.
Yes,
BT does.
Absolutely. Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. Anyway, yeah. And any time that there are these conspiracies where they're like, oh, the federal government did blah, 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 my parents are like, you guys have way too much faith in the ability of the federal government to keep something secret.
Okay, you know what? That's something that the state government has in common. I'm like, you give it way too much credit.
Yeah.
Like, here's the kind of bullshit that most government employees have to deal with. I know some friends of mine who work in the IT department for the state of Alaska, and they literally couldn't get approval to buy a fucking trash can. Okay? That's what we're talking about here. People give the government way too much credit.
Like the
amount of intelligence agencies.
Yeah.
Still government.
Like, people can't handle, I don't know. It's just,
come on. I agree with you. It's Occam's razor.
It's not even about having faith in the government. It's about not having faith in the government. I don't have the faith in the government that it would be able to produce this kind of conspiracy. So, like,
yeah.
And I don't know. I don't think there's a lot of motive for government agencies to have killed Kennedy anyway. Like, obviously there's little shit, but you don't murder somebody over petty shit, Yeah. Or you don't organize a massive assassination conspiracy plot over petty bullshit. Yeah. And that's really all it was.
And I mean, obviously, like, Oswald was an extremist.
Yes.
So, I mean, is it really horrible that he died? Absolutely. Anytime someone dies before their time is horrible.
Especially before he could face charges.
And for both of them to die really publicly, it's really fucked up. And the brutalness that his family had to go through, JFK's family had to go through from him being assassinated. I can't even imagine. Because your whole life's already on display.
Yeah.
Their life has been torn apart.
On display.
On display for everyone, everywhere, all the time. Do you know how many resources I found for this? How much stuff I went through? There was way too much about it. But, I don't know.
I don't know. Y'all think too much of the government.
Yeah.
That is my...
No, don't get me wrong. I do think that there are certain cases in which they're...
Oh, yeah.
I mean...
we may or may not be thinking of one of the same cases, but...
What's yours?
The one where the guy was in the bag. That's in England, but, the guy was found dead in a tote bag that was locked shut.
Yeah, and they were like, oh, yeah, there's no way that he could have zipped himself in the bag. Yeah. Yeah. I was not thinking of that one. I was just thinking conspiracy theories in general. Yes, I think some of them have traction.
Yes. Not this one.
Yeah,
but
not this one. I mean, in specifically, I think conspiracy theories involving private companies are significantly more likely than government conspiracies.
And we'll leave it at that because you can probably guess some of the conspiracy theories we're talking about. But
I have one in particular that I'm actually quite fond of. And I actually think it holds a lot of weight, but that is beside the point.
Anyway.
Okay. Thanks for hanging out and listening to today's episode of A Wild Mystery Podcast Appears. This has been a review of the Kennedy assassination.
We hope you join us next week and check out our social media to see notes or pictures from today's episode. Stay safe.